There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words. And if you truly understand human behavior, not from judgment, but from awareness, you begin to see that what looks like distance is sometimes a cry for connection. An avoidant personality doesn't run because they don't feel. They run because they feel too much. When someone withdraws right after a moment of closeness, when they go quiet after vulnerability, when they create space just when things were becoming real, most people interpret that as rejection. But what if it's the opposite? What if that retreat is their nervous system saying, "This matters too much. I don't know how to hold it"? Understand this. People don't avoid what is meaningless. They avoid what feels powerful. When an avoidant still circles your world, still checks in indirectly, still reacts, still leaves breadcrumbs of presence, they are not detached. They are conflicted. They are conflicted. And conflict is proof of care. You must learn to see behavior not just at the surface level, but at the level of fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of being dependent, fear of losing control, fear of being abandoned first. The divine principle here is simple. What we resist most often reveals what we desire most. When someone pushes you away but never truly leaves, when they minimize their feelings yet cannot sever the bond, when they create arguments at the edge of intimacy, it is not because you are insignificant. It is because you are significant. Significance triggers survival patterns. But here's the higher truth. You cannot heal someone by chasing them. You reach out not from desperation, but from grounded strength. You extend connection without abandoning yourself. That is power. Reaching out is not begging. It is leadership. If it comes from emotional certainty, if you understand their pattern and you remain centered, you become safety. And safety is what disarms avoidance. Avoidants are not asking for pursuit. They're asking for reassurance without pressure. They are asking, is love still here even when I retreat? The most transformative relationships are not built on intensity. They are built on regulated nervous systems, on consistency, on emotional courage. And courage does not mean forcing closeness. It means saying calmly and confidently, I see you. I'm not threatened by your space. I'm here when you're ready. That energy changes everything. Because at the deepest spiritual level, love is not about possession. It is about presence. It is about holding steady when fear rises. It is about choosing connection over ego. If an avoidant pulls back but keeps the thread unbroken, if they test distance but don't disappear, if they guard their heart yet stay within reach, it may be their silent way of asking, can you meet me where I am without overwhelming me? But remember this, you are not responsible for saving anyone. You are responsible for embodying strength, clarity, and compassion. When you operate from abundance instead of fear, your reach becomes an invitation, not a rescue mission. And sometimes that grounded invitation is exactly what allows someone to step out of avoidance and into love. Growth begins where fear ends, and fear ends where safety begins. Be the one who understands that distance is sometimes disguised longing. Be the one who reaches from wholeness. Be the one who transforms confusion into clarity. That is how connection evolves. That is how patterns break. That is how patterns break. That is how love matures into something divine. When an avoidance suddenly becomes unusually quiet after emotional intensity, most people assume the worst. They think I said too much, I did something wrong, or they don't care. But the truth is far more complex and far more human. Silence, in this case, is often not indifference. It is overwhelm. Emotional intensity can feel intoxicating to someone with avoidant tendencies. In the moment, they may be fully present. They may share, laugh, open up, even express affection in ways that surprise you. But after the wave of closeness passes, their nervous system can go into high alert. It is not the connection itself that scares them. It is the vulnerability that came with it. Vulnerability feels like exposure. Exposure feels like risk. And risk to an avoidant mind wired for self-protection feels unsafe. So they retreat. Not because the moment was meaningless, but because it mattered. When emotions run deep, avoidance can feel a sudden loss of control. Their internal dialogue may sound like this. This is getting too serious. I'm becoming too dependent. Or what if I get hurt? That internal pressure builds quickly, and the easiest way to regulate it is distance. Silence becomes their coping mechanism. Instead of processing emotions outwardly, they process inwardly. Instead of seeking reassurance, they create space. Instead of leaning in, they step back. This is not a calculated strategy to manipulate. It is often an unconscious reflex rooted in past experiences where closeness equaled pain, rejection, or suffocation. To understand this dynamic, you have to shift your lens. Emotional intensity activates attachment systems. For someone secure, that activation leads to deeper bonding. For someone avoidant, it can trigger a fight or flight response. The body reacts before the mind has time to reason. Heart rate changes. Thoughts race. The desire to regain autonomy becomes urgent. Their silence, then, is not the absence of feeling, it is the overflow of it. Ironically, the more meaningful the connection, the stronger the urge to withdraw. This is why avoidants often pull away right after a beautiful date, a deep conversation, or a moment of expressed commitment. The very thing they crave, intimacy, also destabilizes them. If you respond to their quietness with panic or pressure, you confirm their fear that closeness equals chaos. But if you recognize it as overwhelm, you respond differently, you remain steady, you don't chase, but you also don't catastrophize. You give space without withdrawing your emotional availability. It's important to note that overwhelm doesn't mean you tolerate endless inconsistency. Understanding is not the same as excusing harmful behavior, but awareness allows you to respond consciously rather than react impulsively. When an avoidant becomes unusually quiet after emotional intensity, what they may be communicating without words is, "I need time to regulate what I just felt." The silence is their nervous system recalibrating. It's their attempt to regain balance after stepping into emotional territory that feels unfamiliar and vulnerable. Seen through this perspective, the quietness stops being a personal rejection and becomes a sign that something significant just occurred. If they maintain subtle contact, watching your stories, liking your posts, sending occasional neutral messages, it may look small on the surface, almost insignificant. But in the emotional world of an avoidant, subtlety is often intentional. It is their way of staying connected without feeling exposed. Avoidants struggle with direct emotional expression, especially when feelings are strong. Reaching out in an obvious way, calling to say they miss you, admitting they're thinking about you, asking for reassurance can feel too vulnerable. It requires them to acknowledge need, and need to someone with avoidant tendencies can feel like weakness or dependency, so instead they choose low-risk connection. Watching your stories is safe. Liking a post is safe. Responding to something you share with a casual comment is safe. It allows them to say, "I'm still here," without having to declare why they're here. It keeps the bridge intact without forcing them to step fully onto it. These behaviors often confuse the other person. You might think, if they care, why don't they just say it? But avoidants don't operate in emotional extremes. They regulate through distance and control. Subtle contact gives them both connection and control at the same time. There's also a deeper psychological mechanism at play. Avoidance fear engulfment. The feeling of losing themselves in a relationship. Direct, emotionally charged communication can feel like stepping into a current that might pull them under. Subtle engagement, however, feels manageable. It allows them to dip their toes into the water without diving in. Another important factor is pride. Many avoidants have strong self-protective pride. If there has been tension, conflict, or a period of distance, initiating a heartfelt conversation may feel like surrender, so instead of openly reaching out, they choose small signals. These signals often mean, "I'm not ready for a big conversation, but I don't want you gone." Subtle contact is also a way of testing emotional safety. They observe how you respond. Do you overreact? Do you ignore them? Do you push for more than they're ready to give? Your response teaches them whether deeper engagement feels safe or threatening. It's crucial to understand that this behavior usually indicates ongoing attachment. Truly detached people disconnect fully. They don't linger in your digital space. They don't find reasons to interact. Consistent, subtle presence suggests unresolved feelings or unfinished emotional business. However, interpreting subtle contact requires emotional maturity. It doesn't automatically mean kamini. And it doesn't promise transformation. It simply signals that the bond is not severed. There is still curiosity, there is still awareness, there is still a thread. How you respond matters deeply. If you interpret subtle contact as manipulation, you may react with resentment. If you interpret it as longing, you may overinvest. The balanced approach is to acknowledge it without attaching fantasy to it. Subtle contact is often the avoidance version of knocking softly on the door. They are not ready to burst in, but they are checking if the door is still open. They are navigating closeness in the only way their nervous system currently knows how. Understanding this doesn't mean lowering your standards. It means recognizing that sometimes the quietest gestures carry the loudest emotional truths. When they create practical excuses to interact, asking for help with something simple, sharing a neutral update, sending a random question that doesn't really require an answer, it can seem casual, even insignificant. But often, this is not random at all. It is a carefully measured way of maintaining connection without exposing emotional need. For someone with avoidant tendencies, direct emotional bids can feel risky. Saying, "I miss you" or "I've been thinking about us" requires vulnerability. It opens the door to rejection, conflict, or deeper expectations. Practical communication, however, feels safer. It keeps the interaction grounded in logic rather than emotion. It allows them to reach out while protecting their pride. When they ask for help with something minor, advice about a decision, assistance with a task, clarification about something, they may not just be seeking the answer. They may be seeking proximity. It is easier to justify reaching out when there is a purpose attached. The task becomes the excuse. The conversation becomes the real goal. Avoidance value independent. Deeply. Admitting emotional reliance can feel like surrendering autonomy, but asking for practical help preserves their sense of control. It allows them to connect without feeling dependent. In their mind, they are still self-sufficient. They are not chasing. They are simply handling something necessary. Neutral updates function in a similar way. They might share news about work, a trip, or something happening in their life without attaching emotional context. On the surface, it looks like small talk. Underneath, it may be a way of saying, "I still want you involved in my world." It is controlled, vulnerability, measured, limited, but intentional. There is also an element of testing emotional climate. When they initiate practical contact, they are often gauging your response. Are you warm? Are you resentful? Are you pressuring? Your reaction gives them data about whether deeper connection feels safe. They may not consciously frame it this way, but internally, they are scanning for emotional stability. If you respond with intensity, turning a simple question into a heavy relationship discussion, you can inadvertently reinforce their fear of closeness. But if you respond calmly and consistently, you demonstrate emotional regulation. That stability builds trust over time. It's important to recognize that avoidants often struggle to articulate complex feelings. Practical interaction becomes a bridge. It keeps communication open while they sort through internal conflict. They may not yet have the language for what they feel, but they still feel the pull of connection. However, discernment matters. Occasional practical outreach suggests lingering attachment. Constant surface-level interaction without emotional growth may indicate avoidance that isn't evolving. The key is observing patterns, not isolated moments. When someone consistently finds reasons to talk to you fader the emotional door seemed closed. That is rarely accidental. People do not invest energy where they feel nothing. Creating excuses is often safer than confessing desire. In many cases, those practical messages are unspoken invitations. They are saying indirectly, "I don't know how to come closer emotionally yet, but I don't want distance either." It is connection filtered through self-protection. Understanding this dynamic allows you to respond with awareness rather than confusion. You see the subtext without forcing it into something it is not. And that clarity changes the entire emotional equation. When an avoidant brings up the past or meaningful memories, it can catch you off guard. You may wonder why they're revisiting moments long gone, or why they are dwelling on times that seem trivial to you. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, revisiting the past is often a subtle, indirect way of signaling connection and expressing longing without overt vulnerability. Avoidants struggle to express emotions directly in the present. Saying, "I miss you," or "I want to be close," can feel overwhelming, exposing them to rejection or the weight of dependency. Memories, however, are safe terrain. They allow them to engage emotionally without fully opening themselves up. When they mention a shared experience from months or even years ago, they are gently reminding both themselves and you of the bond that exists. Bringing up meaningful memories is often their way of testing the emotional waters. They want to see if the connection still matters, if you respond with warmth or indifference without risking their own emotional safety. It is a quiet probe, a soft check-in. The past becomes a bridge to the present, allowing them to gauge if intimacy is still possible without triggering fear. There is also a powerful psychological principle at play. Nostalgia can lower the barriers of avoidance. By revisiting moments that were happy, significant, or emotionally charged, avoidants can experience closeness in a controlled way. They can feel the pull of connection without immediately confronting the vulnerability that true intimacy demands. Memories become their safe method of emotional expression. For someone who appears emotionally distant, this behavior is a significant indicator of attachment. People who are truly detached rarely care enough to reflect on the past or bring it up. They move forward, unbothered by what was shared or experienced together. When an avoidant chooses to highlight a memory, it demonstrates unresolved emotional engagement. It shows that they are still invested at some level, even if fear prevents them from acting directly. It's important to recognize the subtlety of their signals. They are rarely overtly sentimental or dramatic. They might casually mention a joke you shared, comment on a past event you both enjoyed, or refer to a conversation that once mattered. These small gestures carry weight. They are breadcrumbs leading to understanding. They reveal a desire for closeness without demanding it, a way of saying, "I still remember, I still care," without exposing themselves to full vulnerability. When you notice this pattern, how you respond matters immensely. Responding with acknowledgement and warmth, without pressuring them into immediate intimacy, can reinforce safety and encourage deeper connection over time. Overreaction or neglect can inadvertently reinforce their avoidance patterns, creating emotional distance where none is needed. Memories are also a form of communication that transcends words. And in avoidance mind, revisiting the past allows them to process feelings, regulate anxiety, and subtly invite reciprocity. By referencing a shared history, they are not merely reminiscing, they are signaling that I value the connection and are considering ways to re-engage safely. Understanding this principle transforms how you interpret avoidant behavior. What seems like nostalgia or idle chatter is often a carefully navigated expression of care, a quiet call for attention, and a plea for reassurance that the bond remains alive. Recognizing this opens the door to responding with awareness, compassion, and strategic patience, creating space for connection without triggering fear. When an avoidant reacts strongly to distance or jealousy but denies needing you, it can feel confusing, frustrating, and even contradictory. You might think, if they truly cared, why won't they admit it? But this behavior is a hallmark of avoidance, where emotional investment exists, but the expression of it is filtered through fear, self-protection, and a need for autonomy. Understanding this dynamic requires seeing beyond surface actions and into the underlying emotional architecture of an avoidant personality. Avoidants are wired to value independence and self-sufficiency above all else. Admitting emotional need, dependency, or vulnerability can trigger intense discomfort because it challenges their internal belief that to survive emotionally, they must be strong, controlled, and self-contained. Yet this doesn't mean they don't feel attachment or desire connection. It only means that showing it in traditional ways, expressing longing, admitting fear of loss, or directly communicating love feels threatening. When they react strongly to distance, it is often an unconscious signal that their attachment system is activated. Seeing you withdraw, even temporarily, can trigger panic, anxiety, or heightened sensitivity. They may become irritable, defensive, or even push back aggressively, as if to mask the fear they feel internally. Outwardly, it can seem like overreaction or indifference. Inwardly, it's fear expressing itself indirectly. They are caught between the desire to pull you close and the fear of being pulled too close themselves. Similarly, jealousy can serve as an indirect expression of attachment. They may deny being bothered or minimize their feelings, but subtle cues, curiosity about who you were with, slight irritability, or passive comments reveal that they do care. Avoidants often struggle to integrate their emotions with their desire for autonomy, so the expression is coded. Jealousy becomes a low-risk way to communicate that you matter without having to openly declare it. The paradox here is crucial. Avoidants often deny their needs precisely because acknowledging them threatens the delicate balance they maintain between connection and independence. They do not want to appear dependent or vulnerable, yet their actions betray the attachment they cannot fully admit. This is why someone may lash out, become moody, or express subtle frustration after perceived distance, even while insisting they are fine or don't care. Recognizing this dynamic allows you to respond with strategic clarity rather than frustration. Overreacting to their denial or trying to extract verbal affirmation can reinforce their fear of exposure. Instead, seeing the pattern for what it is, a hidden call for reassurance masked in defense, allows you to meet them where they are emotionally. You can offer calm presence, consistent boundaries, and measured engagement, creating a space where they feel safe enough to eventually lower their defenses. At the heart of this behavior is a universal principle. Emotional signals are not always direct, and love often communicates through paradox, resistance, and subtlety. The avoidance push-pull is not lack of care. It is care expressed through fear-laden patterns. The denial of need, coupled with strong reactions, is an invitation, a complex, coded plea for recognition, attention, and security. Understanding this transforms your perspective. Instead of taking denial personally, you see it as an opportunity to respond with wisdom, patience, and grounded presence. Their resistance becomes a map to their emotional truth, revealing where connection, fear, and attachment intersect. And in that awareness, you gain the power to navigate the push and pull with confidence, empathy, and clarity. When an avoidant pushes you away during moments of vulnerability but doesn't fully let go, it can feel like a constant puzzle. One moment they're distant, guarded, or even cold, and the next they are still present, still engaged, still lingering in ways that suggest they cannot completely detach. This behavior is not random. It is rooted in a deep, often unrecognized struggle between fear and attachment. Understanding this pattern requires seeing their actions as a dance between self-protection and emotional investment. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves from emotional exposure. Vulnerability, especially in relationships, triggers a sense of risk. When someone expresses closeness, need, or love in a way that feels intense, avoidants may instinctively pull back. This is not a reflection of their feelings toward you. It is a survival mechanism. Retreating gives them a sense of control over their emotional environment, allowing them to regulate anxiety, maintain autonomy, and avoid the perceived threat of dependency. Yet retreating does not equate to disinterest. In fact, the very act of pulling away while remaining partially engaged demonstrates that there is an underlying emotional bond. They are conflicted. They want closeness, but fear it at the same time. This push and pull pattern is their way of navigating intimacy safely. It is their nervous system's way of saying, I want connection, but I need it on my terms. When an avoidant doesn't fully let go, it is often because attachment remains strong. People who are truly disconnected rarely maintain any thread of presence. Avoidants, however, may continue to like your posts, check in occasionally, or remain in your life in subtle ways even after emotional distance. These actions reveal that despite their fears, they are invested. They care enough to stay present, even if they cannot yet embrace closeness fully. This behavior also reflects the difficulty avoidants have in integrating love and fear. They desire intimacy and connection, but the intensity of those feelings can trigger anxiety, self-doubt, and fear of being overwhelmed. By pushing you away, they attempt to manage these emotions. By not leaving entirely, they signal that attachment persists. They are negotiating the tension between need and autonomy. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for responding wisely. Reacting with anger, frustration, or panic often reinforces their avoidance. It can make them feel unsafe, prompting further withdrawal. Responding with calm, consistent presence and non-judgmental awareness, however, creates the space they need to gradually engage more fully. It communicates that connection is possible without threat, and that vulnerability can be met with steadiness rather than pressure. The push and pull is not a reflection of inadequacy or a lack of love. It is a reflection of unresolved patterns, protective strategies, and the complexity of human attachment. Their retreat and lingering presence is a silent plea, a subtle message that they need reassurance without losing control. Recognizing this allows you to interpret avoidant behavior through a lens of clarity rather than confusion. Their avoidance becomes a guide, showing where boundaries, patience, and understanding are necessary. You learn to see beyond immediate behavior to the deeper, emotional truth. They may fear closeness, but they are not immune to attachment. In fact, their inability to fully let go is proof that even behind walls of self-protection, care remains. This insight transforms how you approach connection. You stop chasing or pushing. You stop taking distance personally. Instead, you respond from a place of grounded presence, offering calm stability, compassionate awareness, and unwavering clarity. And in that response, you create the conditions for their fear to soften, their walls to lower, and for authentic intimacy to gradually become possible. Thank you for your time and trust. I truly appreciate our conversation. Wishing you clarity, strength, and all the best on your journey ahead.